Hello, good evening and welcome to Prime Business. I am Pius Kojubaka. Economist and finance professor, Professor Godfrey Bobkin, has criticized the structural foundation of Ghana's economy, stating that the over-reliance on primary commodities continues to erode the true economic resilience. Here is more from the Joy Business Economic Forum held today. Speaking at the Joy Business Economic Forum, Professor Godfrey Bobkin noted that more than 70% of Ghana's export earnings still come from unprocessed natural resources such as gold, cocoa, and crude oil, a trend that has seen little change since independence.
Since independence, the sustainability of our economy is still based on primary commodities. There is no way you can talk about resilience within that context. More than 70% of Ghana's export earnings are still driven by primary commodities. In fact, the same percentage, you can see that from the literature right from independence. From independence, more than 70% of our export earnings were still driven by primary commodities. We are still talking about the same, almost the same percentage now. When we say we have done well, it's more of the same. So how do you talk about resilience? Your economy is only resilient because the negative events we are seeing now tends to disproportionately benefit gold. And therefore, we are getting some gains from there. What if the crisis had come from the perspective of commodities? What would have happened to us? So over the years, decades, we have not really structurally transformed this economy. We haven't diversified this economy. Earlier, I spoke about the lack of fiscal connectivity, transportation, and the rest of them. So if you are determining national resilience for crisis management and strategy, the building blocks goes beyond just focusing on one product or industry. You are looking at diversifying your economy so that shocks in one line of the economy, once you lose in one line of the economy, you also gain from another line of the economy so that your resilience is a bit more stronger going forward.
He also disclosed that Africa is a net creditor to the world due to the wealth of resources on the continent.
It will interest you to note that the reason we talk about lack of funding and challenges in Africa is not because Africa doesn't have resources. In fact, Africa is a net creditor to the rest of the world. Africa is a net creditor to the rest of the world. Africa is the only continent, and Ghana for that matter, where water flows upwards and there's redistribution of wealth. It's simply because we have not built governance institutions that fosters trust in government and government institutions that allows us to plow back our own funding to finance our development outcome and own the development process. So at the end of the day, even if you check in Ghana here, and that is why some of us were so much against domestic debt testing. If you check in Ghana here, the upper middle income class are essentially looking at how they can externalize their wealth, invest offshore as a form of security and the rest of them. Meanwhile, it's the same country that needs resources.
On his part, board chairman of the Chamber of Oil Marketing Companies, Gabriel Kumi, revealed that Ghana will need approximately $3 billion to secure 6 months' worth of fuel reserves to cushion the country against external shocks in times of global shortage of petroleum products.
The boss levy is just about $4.8 million. But if even assuming we have the storage capacity and we say we want to buy products to store, we need about $3 billion to be able to do that. So you can imagine what $4.8 million can do.
Okay.
Assuming that the boss levy is used by government to secure strategic fuel reserve bond, the payback period will be over 50 years. So I'm just trying to see to really put out the gap in financing that we have in our attempt to have that 6 months strategic reserve. Given this, our view is that government and NPA in the short term focus more on building a second CBN facility to make it easier for vessels to discharge product quickly and eliminate the bureaucratic nature of the Lacan allocation. Normally you have vessels coming on shore, and it takes them about a week to discharge because we don't have enough discharging facilities for petroleum products. So it makes the discharge very inefficient because you need to be in a queue to be able to discharge products. So once we have another CBM.
Senior partner at AB and David Africa, David Ofosudote, advised government to always forecast the impact of global shocks on the country.
So as a country, we should be consciously geosensitive in every decision that we take, and that affects us in how, and that's a point where we're talking about. Let's look at another example of conflict. China-US tariff. China-US tariff is not a war, but it's a conflict nevertheless. We have 10%, if my memory serves me right. But in a geosensitive country, we should be discussing how do we position our trade relationships. Remember that we have AFTA, and remember we have AGOA. And these things affect us. It affects the number of entities who are going to continue exporting. AGOA expires in September. I don't know the policy the Ministry of Trade is working on, but the last time I checked, AGOA for the rest of Africa had dropped from about 24 billion to 11 billion. Our trade from Africa to China has increased to about 270 billion, with Ghana to about 11 billion. China is looking for about 200 billion worth of organic foods. So in making decisions on trade, are we sensitive to an 11 billion potential export, or a $200 billion potential export, or we are sensitive to chasing AGOA? I'm not saying we can't have both. I'm just giving you an example of how geosensitive we ought to be.
The Joy Business Economic Forum was on the theme, Ghana at Risk, the economic fallout of distant conflicts. You can get more of that story when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Now, let's shift focus to some other stories. Finance Minister Dr. Kasiala Tuforsen has commenced discussions with Chinese commercial creditors with the hope of quickly securing a deal with them. More in this report.
The Finance Minister, Dr. Tuforsen, is currently leading a government team in China with the hope of engaging these commercial creditors. The country is now left to reaching a deal on restructuring remaining 2.6 billion debt owed to the commercial creditors. Joy Business understands that a significant amount of this debt owed to lenders from China, Ghana, has already reached a deal with China when it comes to the bilateral debt. However, the challenge now is with the commercial creditors that are made up of commercial banks and other lenders that are owned by the Chinese government. Sources say the Finance Minister, Dr. Tuforsen, is quite hopeful a favorable deal can be reached at the end of deliberations with these creditors in China before he jets home.
Deputy Minister of Finance Thomas Nyakuampem is making a strong case for Africa's own financing structure to aid development in Ghana and other countries in the region. The minister said this at the opening of the 32nd annual meeting of Afreximbank in Abuja, Nigeria. George Afe reports.
More integrated than the one in which I was born. This is the dream.
Speaking at the annual meetings here in Abuja, Nigeria, the Deputy Minister of Finance, Thomas Nyakuampem, maintained that due to the current global financing challenge, African countries must look within.
As we gather here in Abuja, we do so at a critical inflection point. The global economic landscape is evolving rapidly, and Africa must continue to chart its own course. One rooted in self-belief, integration over isolation, production over dependence, and collaboration over fragmentation. This week, let us make the most of our time. Let us not only reflect on what has been achieved, but more importantly, let us imagine and design what is possible.
He maintained that the example of Afreximbank has shown that African countries, including Ghana, can look within to deal with the financing gap that they are facing when it comes to raising the required financial support to finance infrastructure development in their respective countries.
Global financial architecture, as it stands, does not always favor the developing world. Yet institutions like Afreximbank provide African solutions to African needs, tailored, timely, and transformational. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the future of Africa is as bright as the challenges we are willing to overcome. We stand at the crossroads of immense opportunities and formidable obstacles. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area presents a historical chance to unlock the full potential of our markets, uniting 1.4 billion people under a single economic framework. With the right policies and investments, we can achieve unprecedented economic integration and prosperity.
The governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria also argued that African countries must also look at exploring ways to settle some of their payment systems within the African continent. And he sees the functions of Afreximbank as critical in doing this.
Looking forward, as we celebrate 32 years of Afrexim's remarkable impact, we must also turn our eyes to the future. A future that calls for even greater ambition and clarity of purpose. Afreximbank has helped us dream big. Now it is time to deliver big. Let us commit to building the resilient institutions our people need, our economies require, and our continent deserves. And let us live here today not only inspired by the past, but united in the work that lies ahead.
For many people, this annual meetings will indeed see billions of dollars being closed. At this meeting in Abuja, Nigeria, launching the Africa Trade Report, the chief economist for the Afreximbank argued that the report has shown that African countries will grow by some significant margin for this year.
Looking ahead to 2025, despite new risks and emerging challenges, Africa's GDP is expected to grow by 4%, outperforming the global average. Notably, 41% of all African economies are expected to grow above 5%. Average inflation is expected to decline from about 19% to about 15% in 2025 compared to 2023, thanks to tighter monetary policy, price stabilization efforts, and easing supply constraints among many of our countries in Africa. Debt is also expected to improve modestly, with the debt-to-GDP ratio for Africa falling from 67.2% to 65% in 2025. Finally, African trade is projected to grow 5.1% ahead of global trade. Intra-African trade, importantly, is forecast to grow at 6.6% on average annually between 2025 and 2028. And this will be driven by the EFCFTA implementation, price stability, and Africa's green energy transition agenda.
From the 32nd Afrexim Annual Meetings in Abuja, Nigeria, this is George Jaffe reporting for Joy Business.
Back home in Ghana, the Ghana Revenue Authority will from July 1 commence a 15% value-added tax on non-life insurance premiums. More in this report.
On its social media pages, the GRA said starting July 1st, 2025, a 15% VAT will be applied to non-life insurance premiums in Ghana. According to the GRA, the tax will affect property, health and travel. Motor insurance is, however, exempted. The tax handle is expected to improve revenue collection for government to help meet government's targets set in the 2025 budget. By this, individuals or businesses will pay 15% more to insurance companies in exchange for an insurance policy which provides financial protection against potential losses or damages. This will bring additional costs to policyholders.
Spanish ambassador to Ghana has described Ghana's debut participation in the EU-funded Intermark program as a major success. Speaking to Joy Business after a presentation on the Atlantic Strategic Project, he highlighted the country's leadership in approving projects under the initiative, which aims to promote sustainable development and cooperation between Europe's outmost regions and Africa.
Officials and development partners gathered to showcase the Atlantic Strategic Project, one of 20 initiatives approved with Ghana under the first call of the Intermark program from 2021 to 2027. Spanish Ambassador Angel Losada, speaking to Joy Business, emphasized Ghana's strong showing in the program, noting it leads all African countries in the number of approved projects.
Being the first time Ghana is participating, it's a really big success because 20 projects have been designated and elaborated for Ghana, which is number one now among the young African countries in the number of projects. I think that it's a project, a series of projects that will be growing in time, and that this is not the end of a process, but the beginning. So I think that what the aim of all that is to consolidate or reinforce the cooperation between the African countries and these ultra-peripheric regions of Madeira, Azores and the Canary Islands that have a lot of potential.
According to the Director General of European Affairs for the Canary government, Celia Alberto Perez, the Intermark program is expected to play a key role in Ghana's development agenda.
We share the same goals. The program and the Ghana authorities share the same goals, and we are looking forward to collaborate just to find a way to share goals and do in both sides of the countries, in Ghana and in European zones. We are looking for the way to find that measures that can give a long-term sustainable to the objectives that we were talking about.
Head of the EU, Europe and Americas unit at the Ministry of Finance, Ebenezer Norty, emphasized that this partnership is focused not on fiscal infrastructure, but on institutional capacity building, skills transfer, and cross-border collaboration with EU regions.
It's not a brick and mortar program where we are going to see construction of roads and mini grids and all that, but it's about knowledge power, where capacities of our institutions are going to be built through forging relationships with the Madeira, Azores, and then the Canary Islands. Definitely they have some expertise. We also have ours. And so teaming together, we are able to leverage on others' expertise and then build capacities for our respective countries.
Ghana's involvement in the Intermark program marks a key step in building lasting partnerships for sustainable development and innovation.
A burst of color, culture and conversation. Today, we are stepping inside the BA Champon Gallery at the West Hills Mall in Accra again, where Ghanaian art takes center stage. From bold brush strokes to woven traditions, this exhibit brings the heart of West Africa to life in stunning detail. Enjoy this.
Tucked in the bustling heart of Ghana, where red earth meets the rhythm of tradition and modernity, stands a hidden sanctuary of creativity. This is not just a building of brick and mortar, it is a breathing, living archive of our collective memory. Welcome to Be a Champion Gallery at the West Hills Mall in Accra. Behind every sculpture, every carefully chiseled line and molten metal curve is a man, Be a Champion, a name that has come to symbolize more than just art, a storyteller, a keeper of culture, a visionary.
I'm Pan-Africanist. I like everything about Africa. You can see from what I'm wearing.
For many years, a Champion has drawn from the deep well of Ghanaian heritage, the legends, the textures of the land, and the beat of the drum. But it's his hands that truly speak, shaping and casting metal, painting vivid canvases that echo tradition and imagination, transforming silence into stories that speak volumes.
The drumming and dancing, depot, the way we do, the way we cook, the way we dress, everything. You see, that one really inspired me a lot. So to preserve that one in my small way, I always try to put it in my painting or my sculpture works.
For a Champion, art is not decoration, it is a declaration. Be a Champion is open to galleries in Ghana's capital, one at the Atlantic Mall at Atomic Junction close to Medina, and West Hills Mall, where we are today. Be a Champion's gallery is more than a personal showcase, it's a cultural beacon, a sacred space where art, identity, and imagination converge. Every corner tells a story. Bronze busts that whisper ancestral wisdom, abstract forms that pulse with emotion, and faces, so many faces molded with soul and memory.
I have a work I'm working on, which I haven't finished. The title is Ukuma Pima Apimbeba. You can see where I'm coming from. A group of people, some holding cutlasses, guns, and the rest. And then, you see, that history, the forefathers, the way they fought for our, independence, fought during the slave trade era down. So most of my works, you see people fighting for freedom, but in abstract form.
Visitors don't simply pass through. They pause, they reflect, they remember.
The interest is now growing, if I may put it that way. Well, when we started 2005, those days, people were not much interested in art at all. But now, people are beginning to show much appreciation.
This is not just a gallery, it's a dialogue between past and present, between artist and audience, between Ghana and the world. But a Champion's vision stretches beyond the walls of this gallery. He believes in passing the torch, in nurturing tomorrow's sculptors, painters, and dreamers.
Now, people are now showing much interest because the young ones, they are doing creative art in school. They go home with homeworks, and then the parents helping them to do it. See, the more you pay attention to certain things, the more your interest keeps developing.
A Champion dreams of a future where every Ghanaian home owns a piece of art, not as luxury but as legacy, a daily reminder of identity, heritage, and pride.
Buying painting is the same as you putting your money in the bank. Because if you buy painting from Be a Champion, let's say 5,000 cedis, the next 2-3 years, we are thinking of times 10 or so. Because imagine you have my work, let's say 10-20 paintings when I started 2005, and you are selling it today. Even to me, you get like 20 times of the price you bought those days. And then also, painting is something that is therapeutic. Therapeutic in the sense that if you have very good abstract painting on your wall, and let's say you want to read meanings into the work, you sit down, you look at it, the more you focus on the work, the more you forget about your sickness or something. And then of course, the more you think about your sickness, the more you get closer to your grave. So you have good paintings, you have quality artwork. That one will serve you as a kind of therapy. And then also for the beautification. Of course, you can't be having bare wall. Always let your walls talk. When somebody enters your room, they should see something new, something different.
Be a Champion is not merely shaping metal and clay, He's shaping minds, shaping futures, and reshaping the way Ghana sees itself through art.
Prime Business. I am Pius Kojobaka. We have more for you when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business.